Oh, oh God. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Gabester here. This is the normal raid guide for Malkorok in Siege of Orgrimmar. Feel free to click on the annotations to check out the role-specific guides, or just the quick raid guide if you want that. Otherwise, let's get started. For this fight, your raid will need 2 tanks and 2 or 3 healers. Pretty standard stuff there. I would recommend trying 3 healers if you're a progression guild, not overgeared like we are, and see how you do in terms of the DPS requirement. This fight has a hard out at 6 minutes, at which point Malkorok will just destroy everyone in the raid pretty much instantly. So it's very easy to tell if you reach that point that you don't quite have the DPS required. The healing requirement is not all that severe, but there are mechanics that are much more difficult if you don't quite have enough healing going on. So again, if you have the option to use third healer, especially a DPS type healer, I would give that a shot and see how you fare. So the primary gimmick or mechanic for this fight is Ancient Miasma, or in combination with that, Ancient Barrier. If you've experienced the Heroic Tortoise fight from Throne of Thunder, you'll be very, very familiar with the overall idea of this mechanic. Essentially, it is a healing absorption mechanic. Throughout the majority of the fight, basically for a full 2 minutes, every 2.5 minutes of the encounter, you'll be afflicted with Ancient Miasma across the raid. And this essentially absorbs all healing and converts it into an Ancient Barrier absorption shield. This will absorb up to a maximum of 100% of a player's health in additional absorb. Now, these absorbs take the form of 3 different strength buffs. The strongest strength is Strong Ancient Barrier with a green icon. The moderate one is just Ancient Barrier with yellow icon. And as you might guess, the weaker one is Weak Ancient Barrier with a red icon. So while a player has one of those buffs active, they will have some form of absorb shield on them. The green one being at max and the yellow being moderate, red being low. If the player does not have any form of Ancient Barrier, however, damage that they take will be applied to their health. And because the debuff of Ancient Miasma will be active, any healing applied to them will not actually regenerate their health pool directly. It will just apply to the Ancient Barrier absorb shield instead. So effectively what this means is that if a player takes more than 100% of their health without being healed, they're going to take effective damage on their health pool, and this is not recoverable until you enter the second phase, which takes about 2 minutes before it first starts. So the most obvious thing about managing the Miasma ability is simply to keep players topped off. Beyond that, an important thing is for your healers, especially, to have a clear indication of when players have the various forms of the Ancient Barrier buff. So they should add it to their grid or unit frames in some way so that healers are aware when a player has strong Ancient Barrier versus just the Ancient Barrier versus weak Ancient Barrier or nothing, and to make sure to heal those players that have the weaker ones or nothing to get them some form of absorption. You can see in my grid at the bottom there, I didn't have that, so things were a little hectic. But again, our group in general overgears this quite a bit, so it didn't matter a whole lot for us in particular. But overall, that's the best thing you can do to help manage it. The other major thing is when you first engage the boss, you will immediately gain Ancient Miasma, but no one will have an absorb at the time. So this would be a good time to use quick heal or quick burst heal abilities to apply some absorbs to everyone, especially the tank. Your tank could also pull the boss from max range, making sure your DPS don't engage quite right away. And this will give your healers a moment to get some heals on that tank so that the initial damage doesn't actually break through the shield already. So just a few basic tips for handling that, and that'll help you out quite a bit. But overall, just try to keep everyone at yellow or green, if possible, on the Ancient Barrier buffs, and you'll be fine. So the next really important ability to manage properly, and this involves your entire raid, is Imploding Energy. This is used about every 20 seconds in the primary phase, so for the first 2 minutes of the fight, and then a delay of 30 seconds, then another 2 minutes, and so on. When this is used, you'll see 3 purple spots on the ground. There you can see them pop up there. These are going to appear in random locations, and when they spawn, your raid members need to quickly move and stand in them. If you have one player in an Imploding Energy location, that player will take about 450,000 shadow damage, as well as to anyone else in the absorb, so it should only be one person. But if no player is in one of them, instead the damage is dealt to the entire raid. So it's always beneficial for a player to be soaking every one of those Imploding Energy locations. If you fail to do even 2 of them, it probably means a raid wipe. So just keep that in mind. So for this reason, the best thing you can do to soak these up is to spread your raid out appropriately. Now, you can use raid markers, but as I'll explain in a moment, typically you're going to want to use raid markers for another purpose in this fight, and therefore you can't use them as permanent location markers. So instead, the best thing that we found was just to initially move around the room before we actually pull, and have our ranged and our healers kind of spread out and have basic quadrants of the room that they will watch. Some of the orbs will spawn close enough to the center where your melee will be that the melee can help out as well. But for the most part, this will be a job for your ranged and healer players to take care of. So that's always a priority, is moving and soaking every Imploding Energy bomb that goes off. And once those have gone off, you can move back to your original quadrant or location and wait for the next thing to happen. Next, we have Arcane Smash and Breath of Visage. So this combination of abilities is the reason that you may want to use raid markers for things other than permanent locations. So pretty frequently, about every 20 seconds, and this always precedes the cast of the Imploding Energy orbs, he will cast Arcane Smash at the location of a random player. And this is basically a cone attack that does major physical damage to anyone that it touches. It's got a very clear graphic though, so there you can see it casting toward me. So everyone sidesteps it, and once it goes off, you actually want to remember the area that was created in. There isn't any clear indication on the ground that's left behind after it's gone. So for this purpose, we use raid markers to essentially mark the center location of each cone. So there you can see the third one going off. We marked it with a red marker. Now, after every third Arcane Smash, the next set of orbs will come out. And once those are soaked, your raid members need to find a safe spot between those smash locations. So I'm going to repeat that clip there so you can see what happens. But this is the Breath of Visage effect. So once all 3 Arcane Smash locations have gone out, the next thing he'll do after the orbs come out and are soaked is use that Breath of Visage ability, which basically electrifies the ground cone areas where the previous 3 Arcane Smashes occurred. And those areas become extremely dangerous. Anyone that's in them will basically be one-shot. So because Arcane Smash is cast in a random cone location every cast, you need a way to dynamically remember where those come up. Now, you can do this with other methods besides raid markers, but we found simply putting a raid marker in the center to indicate where that straight line is from the smash makes it very easy to visually see. So here we can see the third one going out again. We've got 3 markers down. We're absorbing the follow-up orbs quickly, and now the entire raid finds a safe spot between the smash cone locations. So we have a couple people in the back there. They're safely between the red and the purple-green areas. And meanwhile, the rest of the raid is on this side where there hasn't been a smash for a long time. So that's the basic idea to handle the Arcane Smash and Breath combo. You get 3 Arcane Smashes, you mark their locations. After the third one, and you soak the orbs, you find a safe location because Breath of Visage will be cast next. So finally, we have the Blood Rage phase. Now, during the majority of the fight, for the first 2 minutes essentially, Malkorok simply does his Arcane Smash, followed by Imploding Energy combo 3 times in a row. Then he does his Breath of Visage. He repeats that trio thing once again, and after the second Breath of Visage, he will immediately enter the Blood Rage phase. This is because he's reached 100 Rage, so there was the Breath, and now you can see he's casting Blood Rage. So when this begins, your entire raid needs to stack up immediately in front of him. During this period, Miasma is gone, so there's no more absorption shield mechanics during this time. Damage is taken directly by players, and of course, healing is also applied directly to their health pool. You also need to stack because each melee attack in this phase does massive physical damage, but as you've seen in many other boss fights, this damage is split among targets in front of him. The next thing you have to worry about is Displaced Energy. This is a debuff cast on 2 random raid members during this Blood Rage phase only, and it does heavy shadow damage over 9 seconds, but when it's dispelled, it does even more damage to anyone within 8 yards. So the basic plan is to have the 2 players that are targeted, that are going to be stacked with the raid, run out to the sides, to either side, and once they're clear of the raid, call for a dispel, get dispelled by your healers, and then they can run back in. Now, those players need to be topped off in health, of course, before they come back in, lest they get slashed immediately from the melee and killed. But other than that, those are the main abilities. Blood Rage only lasts for about 25 seconds in terms of total time. So because you're stacked up, because the damage is heavy, that's really when you're going to want to use your heal cooldowns. Also, because once it ends, Miasma will immediately be reapplied, it may be a good idea to have a strong healing output cooldown carry over between the end of the Blood Rage phase and going into the start of the normal phase again. This way, everyone in the raid is immediately topped off in terms of their absorb from the barrier, and they're more stable at that point. The final ability worth mentioning is not really avoidable, but it's something that you should be aware of, especially your healers. During the normal phase, Seismic Slam will be used on random raid members. See on the right there, our paladin got shot up in the air. He was the target of Seismic Slam, and it just targets a random raid member during the normal phase, does about 500,000 physical damage to the target, knocks them into the air, and it will also hit anyone that's within 5 yards. So all the more reason for your ranged healer players to stay spread out. In addition to absorbing the Imploding Energy balls, they also don't want to share Seismic Slam damage. So that ability is the main reason, in addition to the Imploding Energy absorb, that your healers need to try to keep the raid members topped off so that they don't suffer too much permanent health damage during the normal phase. So I think that covers everything. It's actually a pretty simple fight mechanically. You get used to the pattern very quickly, and it's just a matter of execution, absorbing those energy balls, marking the slams, and then watching for the breath when it comes out. After the pattern repeats a second time, stack up for the Blood Rage phase, blow your cooldowns, survive, run out for the dispels, and repeat. I should mention that after Blood Rage ends the first time, the boss will do 25% more damage for the remainder of the fight, and this actually stacks. So even though the Berserk is 6 minutes, you can technically have a few seconds at the end where he's at 50% damage output. But you only have a few seconds at that point to finish him off, so it's kind of going to be a burn phase at that time anyway. Okay, that is the normal raid guide for Malkorok. As always, good luck, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed, please subscribe.